So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new Media and American League Baseball, capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. Over the course of my youth, I made a lot of promises to my mother. Yes, Mom, I promise I'll bathe every day. And no, I won't tell Dad about how the car door got that dent in it. And okay, I promise Ira will never know he's adopted. Oops. But Sam Haskell took this whole thing a lot more seriously. He built a life and career on character and righteousness. And that's one thing if you're a scoutmaster, but he made it work in Hollywood as the longtime head of television for the William Morris Agency, and I believe vice chairman of the agency. And now he's applying those same principles to the Miss America pageant. Haskell is the author of a new book, Promises I Made My Mother, which takes those very same promises and wraps them around his personal life and career. If you're not in show business, you can be forgiven for not knowing Haskell's name, but you'll probably recognize the client of his who wrote the introduction to his book, Ray Romano, star of the hit sitcom Everybody Loves Raymond. Sam, welcome to Mr. Media.
Hi, Bob. It's a pleasure to be with you.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm in Atlanta in the middle of this 56-city book tour and taking some time to speak to you because I hear you're the best.
I hear you're right. No, I don't know that, but that's nice of you to say. I figure a guy from Amory, Mississippi would appreciate St. Petersburg, Florida being the new media capital of the world.
Absolutely, and St. Petersburg is on my tour. I'll be there in July.
Is that right? Well, we'll have to see when we get.
That is correct. So we'll let you know those exact dates.
All right. Well, Sam, I got to ask you: have you ever broken a promise to your mother?
Oh, sure. I mean, none of us is perfect, but I really believe that the most important ones, the most important promises, the promises of love, hope, never letting dreams leave your consciousness, hard work, honesty, integrity, and character are the ones that have carried me through, and those are the ones I've tried so hard not to break.
And did you ever tell one of your two brothers that they were adopted?
No, I did not, because they weren't, and it might have thrown them into some sort of, weeping tizzy that would have gotten me a spanking.
All right. In that case, to my brother, just kidding. You weren't adopted. Right. Lori was adopted, but you weren't, kid, okay? So help me put this in perspective for people. Tell folks a little bit about your mom and your upbringing in Mississippi.
Well, my mother was this beautiful, genteel Southern woman who was brought up in this tiny town of Amory, Mississippi, who people have often compared to Mayberry. She grew up in, a loving home. Her family didn't have a lot of money, but she still, was given a lot of love and encouragement. She got her education at the University of Tennessee through the Air Force Cadet Nursing Corps, and then served at Brooklyn Air Force Base Hospital in Mobile, Alabama, and in a couple of hospitals in New York State after graduating. She met my father in Mobile and married him and had me and my brothers. And we were brought up and raised in Amory, Mississippi, which was her home. It was founded in 1887 as Mississippi's first planned community, which was a halfway depot on the Frisco Railroad between Memphis and Birmingham. Amory was right in the middle. And it's been about 7,000 people since it was founded, and it still is 7,000 people all these years later. And I loved growing up there and having my mother's family all around me, and the family of friends who created the whole village of Amory that was all around me. I attribute so much of my success to the lessons of my mother and the people of Amory.
Mm-hmm. Now that is the picture postcard part of the story.
Right.
Wonderful mother, nice small town community. People in small towns are kind of the same as in big towns. You have people who, fall to the seven evil. But you had some other issues that you had to deal with. Your dad turned out to be not the great character builder that your mom was.
No, he was not. And when I first wrote this book, I really was only focusing on the positive things in my life. And my editor received it and said, "Okay, so you're perfect. Your life is perfect. Nobody's going to like you." And I went, no, that can't be true. She said, "Well, it is, because there's no drama. There's no warts. There's no stumbling blocks. There's no character flaws. Everybody's perfect. And it's because I have this nature of wanting to focus on everything that's right about people, not what's wrong about people. But the point was made, and I spent all last summer rewriting. And what you have in your hand now is Sam Haskell, warts and all. And my publishers and editors called crying and laughing, saying, now we've got a book. Now we've got a book. So, yes, my father had some major issues with a lack of character. And I talk very clearly about some things he did that, created major stumbling blocks, the least of which is, leaving us and forcing my mother into a divorce. But there were other issues of not being there for us or not loving us the way that most fathers should love their children. I think he probably loved us as best he could, but he just couldn't love us the way our mother loved us. And I'm just so grateful that I had the mother I had, because I was determined. And the minute my parents divorced, I was determined. And I think that's where this attitude of looking at what's right comes from. I was determined not to be the typical product of a broken home. I was determined that I would be buttoned down and studious and doing everything the way she taught me to do it so that I could be what in my mind was successful.
Did your mother, did she outwardly and intentionally focus you on your character, or is it just something that was part of her and now your DNA?
I think it was a part of her DNA, but she chose points in our lives, Bob, that we made a mistake or that she could teach us the lesson in practicality, not just in the ethereal, okay, you're going to be this kind of person. She would teach it in the moment, and it was in those moments that it stuck. And I think probably the first and most important thing she taught me and my brothers was that you've got to know how to play well in the sandbox. Yes, I want you to be handsome boys. I want you to be talented. I want you to play a musical instrument. I want you to be smart. But what I really want for you is to be able to get along with other people, because that's what will take care of you the rest of your life.
A person has to be receptive to these type of lessons, don't they? I mean, you, for example, you don't talk a whole lot in the book about your two younger brothers, but the thing that stands out for me, unfortunately, is that near the end of your mom's life, your brothers chose to buy your father's party line about that your mother was just pretending to be ill to get their attention. And so, I mean, we don't, and that's what happens. You have two kids, they can be completely different. You were obviously very receptive to character, building character, a certain kind of character, and making certain types of decisions. Kind of a going away sense I have from the book is that maybe your brothers, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe your brothers have taken a different path or took a different path.
Well, I can tell you quite honestly that what happened is that our father made us choose. He wasn't the kind of father who would go through a divorce and then allow us to love them both. And my brothers chose my father, and I chose my mother. And if we weren't going to be allowed to love them both, and if I had to choose, then I made my choice. And I really think that my brothers were also drawn to my father's money. And I think that that's one of the things that they felt like they would get in the end. And I didn't choose that. I chose my mother because I loved her and she needed me. And after the divorce, my father went in contempt of court, trying to get me to move to Florida and live with him and his new wife, the wife that was the problem that we all had to deal with. And I wouldn't go, and so he cut us off financially. Well, that didn't bother me. I just went to work and helped my mother. I started helping her make house payments when I was 18 years old, and I had this fabulous job teaching swimming lessons. I was a lifeguard and a swimming instructor, and I had this fabulous job every summer at the Amory Municipal Pool, and my mother had been close friends with the Park and Recreations director, having grown up in the town, and he put me to work, and I taught all the lifeguards their life-saving techniques. I taught swimming lessons. I could make $5,000 every summer in June, July, and August, and I used that to help make the house payments, and I used that to put myself through school. And my mother ended up going back to college when she was 55 years old and became Mississippi's first school nurse practitioner and was the school nurse in our hometown. And the sad part of it all is, Bob, is that after she was really firmly established in this new life and career, she got cancer and died at age 60. And that was the really sad part. But then my father, as you've read in the book, took his own life 9 months to the day later. And I think it was probably one of the purest moments of his life in thinking, my God, what have I done? And, this was a really difficult time for me, losing them both in 9 months. But I really had been estranged from my father because as long as I was close to my mother, he did not want me in his life. And that was very hard. But I had other great men to emulate and to admire, and I had this fabulous mother. So I don't feel I lost anything.
Now, since your father's death, have you and your brothers reconciled whatever differences you've had, or are you any closer?
Well, I'm closer to the younger one. I'm not as close to the middle one.
Sorry to hear that. And I'm asking you these questions, and it's funny. I could know you for 5 or 10 years personally, and I would probably never ask you these questions, and yet this is what happens when you write a book. I mean,
I know.
It's
interesting because in 10 national television interviews, no one asked the question except Greta Van Susteren, and she asked the question about my father as well. So I'm completely open to talk about anything in this book. It's who I am and it's what I am, and I'm very real about it. But, there are those who have known me all my life that don't know about my father because I never talk about him and they never ask, and they read this book and they go, oh, my God, I thought I knew you, but I didn't know anything, and now that I've read what you've come through, I love you more. So it's interesting that everyone can find a way to relate and to be a part of it.
Well, yeah, what I was getting at was that it's, when you write a book like this, you open the door to those conversations that can be kind of awkward, whether they're with family or with strangers like myself. Of course, I feel like, 10 minutes later that we're all close personal friends, but,
Right, I'm going to see you when I come to St. Petersburg.
There you go, see? I mean, but it's strange to have these conversations, just as I'm sure when your editors came to you and said, this is great, you're so perfect, but we need to know, you don't get this way. Everything in our lives is not jolly and happy, and they're usually...
That's correct.
There's usually some drama that helps create the people that we are.
My mother believed that everything we were yesterday brings us to today, and everything we are today takes us to tomorrow. And we have to embrace that and understand that. And, we all are products of our environment and products of our upbringing. And what's really interesting in my own parenting, most of the time my mother comes out, but sometimes my father comes out. I tell a story. My father was extremely judgmental. And I tell a story when my own son came home from middle school with a 97 on his world history test, and instead of, I'll just tell it like I tell, I said, oh my gosh, what 3 questions did you miss? Instead of, oh my God, 97, that's awesome, congratulations. And that was an ouch moment for me because it wasn't fair. That was my father coming out of me, and he wanted perfection all the time, and you can't give perfection. And I apologized to my son and embraced that 97 and embraced him. And, we all make mistakes. None of us is perfect. But I try as hard as I can to live by the lessons my mother taught me and the promises I made not to break those lessons. And it's really helped me more often than not.
If you could right now, is there anything you wish you had said but didn't to your father while he was living? Is there anything you would want to say to him now if he suddenly had the opportunity? Well,
I think what I would probably say is something close to what I said in the book, and I said it to my wife Mary after he died, and that was when Mom got sick, and of course he never believed she was ill. He just thought it was a way for me to get my brothers to come visit her and get them away from him. But if I could say anything, is if he had only been nice to me when my mother was ill, even for those 9 months while she was dying, he would have us all now. He would have had all of our attention. Why he couldn't be nice those last 9 months of her life, why he couldn't believe that she was really ill, he would have had these beautiful grandchildren, he would have had relationships with his sons and had all the attention, and that's what he wanted, but he wouldn't share it while she was alive. And that's the part I regret, but I do hope that he's found a lasting peace.
You're probably a lot kinder to him now and in the book than he deserves, I suspect. But that's
I've had people who know the situation who have said those exact words.
Yeah. Well, what was the and I'm sure it's going to be something from the book, but what's the earliest character building incident that you can recall as a kid? What was the earliest thing you can recall that formed who you are?
Well, the thing that probably set me on the path that I'm on was in 1964 when Procter & Gamble had the commercial on television that the cheerman was going out into the United States to visit every city and every state and knock on your door, and if you used cheer and could produce a box top or what they called a reasonable facsimile, he'd give you $10. Well, I was absolutely certain that the cheerman was coming to Amory, Mississippi, but more importantly to 405 South 3rd Street, which was my home. So I wasn't content that my mom used cheer, so I went down to the local print shop and I bought poster paper and glitter and colored paints and rocks, and I made this giant cheer sign logo like the box so that I could put it outside so the cheerman would know where to stop. And that commercial ran every day, every night, every week for months. And I told everybody in town that I was ready, the cheerman was coming, and they'd all roll their eyes. My father even made fun of me in front of his friends. Oh, Sam, bring out your cheer sign. Like he did, right. And my mother would stand there and say, if the child believes the cheerman's coming, then the cheerman's coming. Fast forward a year later, it's now 1965. It's my brother Jamie's birthday, and it's the Friday before Labor Day weekend, and we're all playing football in the front yard, about 12 kids, and down the street we hear, cheer, cheer, cheer is here, cheer. And down the street comes the cheer car, followed by all the kids and dogs and everyone in the neighborhood. And I didn't even stop for a minute to think that it would stop at another house. He was on 3rd Street. He was obviously coming to my house. So I run inside, get my cheer sign. Kids in the yard are ripping my mother's cheer box apart in her laundry room so they would have their box top ready. He gets out of his car. Kids are jumping up and down trying to get his attention. I calmly walk out on the front steps of my house, hold up my sign, and he goes, you get the $10. My father was in absolute shock, and he said, how is this possible? This kid has been waiting for a year for the cheerman, and I never believed in it, never once. And he said, well, sir, it's interesting. We have this new thing called a computer. Remember, it was 1965. But the only thing I could think a computer looked like was a refrigerator with blinking lights on it that we'd seen in sci-fi movies. And into this computer, the chairman said, we put every registered voter in these United States. And 2 homes in every county and every state were kicked out by the computer randomly. And 405 South 3rd Street was one of the 2 homes in Monroe County, Mississippi that was kicked out of the computer, and it's just taken us this long to get down here. So that lesson of blind faith and hard work, because my mother said, well, if you believe the chairman's coming, you need to prepare for him. That's what motivated me to make my sign. It was my sign that made him choose me over the dozen or so other kids jumping up and down for his attention, because the check was made out to resident 405 South 3rd Street. So for him to see me and my sign and pick me out was all a part of me being prepared for him. It's where opportunity and preparation meet at the crossroads. Good things happen. And the chairman, the chairman, by the way, continues to come for me. He's come for me many times, and he can come for you, and he can come for all your listeners if you just believe.
You understand, if I think on reading it the first time and now hearing the story, that I did kind of think that the chairman sounded a little like something out of the Twilight Zone.
Well, Ray Romano talks about the Twilight Zone in his foreword.
Yeah. It's just like, it's kind of a weird one. All right. Have you met, and just out of curiosity, since the book published, have you heard from or met other people who had that experience with the chairman?
No, but they all remember. They all is a very narrow group when you think about it. If there are 80 counties in a state and there are 2 people, that's 160 per state. So whatever, what is that, 900 people had the chairman visit them. So no, I've not met anyone who met the chairman, but I actually heard from one of the chairmen, and his name is Stephen. Oh, I can't remember his name. I put it in the book. But he sent me his picture, and all the chairmen were hired. They had to be the same height, 6 feet tall. They had to be dark hair, thin. They looked like 12 identical, people, and they all were sent out to different regions of the country. And I heard from him, and I've heard from others who were actually waiting for him too, and who he never came, but they certainly remember that this was a really big commercial in the 60s. It ran during Bonanza, and it ran during the Judy Garland show, and it ran during the Beverly Hillbillies and Green Acres and all the shows that I used to watch as a kid.
Pretty funny. Pretty amazing. And probably probably what set in process your problem with your father right from there when you were right and he was wrong about something. He probably never forgave you for that.
Well, I don't know if that's the case or if he just got distracted by other women, but, he didn't believe in my dreams like my mother did. He did not want me even thinking about Hollywood. He thought from the moment I left until the day he died that I had thrown my life away. And I wish that they both could have lived to have seen what happened.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And what was I just going to ask you about that? Now, so I asked you the earliest character building incident you recall as a kid. Now,
it was about the importance of having blind faith, and that was the cheerman.
And then let's take a giant leap here, because then you go out to, you get out of high school, you get out of college, you go out to Hollywood. What was the similar experience in Hollywood in terms of, building that belief, building your character? What was the earliest thing you remember out there?
Well, I had no money, and I had spent all of the money I'd made in swimming lesson money that summer of '78 to buy a car so that I could drive to California. And I got to Los Angeles to go to law school and had, gotten a college loan to pay for that. And the first day I was sitting in class, the teacher looked around and said, okay, a year from now, half of you won't be here. And I knew somewhere in my heart that could possibly be me. So I went my mother always told me to be prepared, and I'd been an Eagle Scout. I was always aware of being prepared as an Eagle Scout. And I went to the placement office at Southwestern Law School in Los Angeles to get the names of some prominent attorneys who had graduated from Southwestern, and one was Ruth Englehart, who was the head of business affairs at the William Morris Agency. Mm-hmm. So my mother's lessons of persistence and my mother's lessons of belief in myself started, and I started calling her office, and I called it and called it and called it for over 2.5 months, and her secretary would laugh when I would call. But the persistence and the perseverance that my mother had taught me, I just kept using until one day, and again, this is the odd thing, it was the Friday before Labor Day, the same day as when the cheerman came all those years before. She answered her own phone, and she said, I have to meet the face that goes with this voice. And I drove to Beverly Hills, met with her for 3 hours that afternoon. She convinced me to withdraw from law school in time to get my money back, pay off the loan, and I started in the mailroom for $125 a week. Now, that was not enough money to live. So the perseverance and the persistence and the faith in myself and the work ethic that my mother had taught me, I went to Universal Studios and was hired for $200 per weekend to work on the tour. And so now I'm making $325 a week, and I thought, oh, this is more money than I could have ever imagined. And I made it work. And that first year I was working 7 days a week, but I made it work.
Why is it that we're so surprised anytime someone with character and morals pops up in Hollywood?
I think because most people think of Hollywood as the characters in Entourage, that series that Jeremy Piven the Emmys for several times. I think that that character Ari Gold is an over-the-top agent who deals in the middle of all these client crises, and in some regards his portrayal is accurate, in others it's over the top. But I do think there are enough accuracies there that it makes it real, and I think people respond to it because it's so out of their realm of knowledge of people. But I can tell you from living it that there were people like that. But there are also people like me. And I don't want people to think that I think I'm the only good person or the only nice guy in Hollywood. There are a lot of them. But it's just not how it's portrayed, and it's really not the majority. The majority is more the slick, do anything to anybody to make anything happen. I was not about doing anything for the deal, Bob. I was about doing the right thing for the deal. And I think that's what made people attracted to me. I think that they wanted some of what I had, and that's what I was able to offer them, and that's what worked.
Well, I joked when we started about promises, but to be honest, I really identified with the way that you, in the book, you talked about learning to make choices that weren't always the easiest or most profitable in the short run, but they're simply the right ones in the long run. And in Hollywood, and frankly, I write books, and within the book industry, it's not, these are not, these are shark-infested waters, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So it's hard. It's hard to try to keep your sense of self in that kind of environment.
But if you know who you are, and this is something else I learned from my mom, you've got to discover who you are, and sometimes it takes us a couple of decades to do that. But if we know who we are and we look in the mirror and decide, okay, that's who I am, now do I like myself? And you like who you are, know who you are and like who you are, then you have to spend the rest of your life busting your tail to maintain who you are. And it's that maintenance of self, that constant maintenance of self that's going to be attacked and challenged and compromised every step of your journey. But if you know who you are and you like who you are and you maintain who you are, you're going to draw other people to you because there's so many who are confused. And when they see someone who knows and someone who brings confidence and consistency to their world of inconsistency, it clicks and they want more of it. And that's what worked for me.
In the book, besides the stuff about your father, which I'm sure was kind of tough to get out, there's one other person in the book that we actually get the sense that you don't like, and that's the person who was brought in as president of the William Morris Agency at a point when you were expecting to get that job. And I give you credit. I mean, I don't get the sense that you ever decided that you liked this guy. Even after some period of time of being up close and personal. As a matter of fact, my sense is that being up close and personal, you kind of got reinforced that I don't like this guy. He's not the right guy for this agency.
Well, I sensed it from the beginning, but because one of my godfathers at the agency, the man I talk about in the book, Walt Zipkin, who was the man who actually hired me when I, went in to see him all those many years before, but he had now become the CEO of the company. And he is the one who had promised me I would be president, and the board had ratified it. And then we had a, flag in our, motion picture department that was, help me. And suddenly we decided maybe it was best that we go find someone to come in and help shore up the feature department. And, Jim Wyatt, the guy that we brought in, had some movie stars and, had some success, but he was unhappy at the company he was at. And my gut told me that he didn't want to come there to be part of our team. He wanted to come there and run everything. And I found out, after I promised Walt Zipkin that I would do everything I could to protect him and his perception and help him get to know people, that all the time I was defending everyone else he was maligning, he was also maligning me behind my back, and it was a devastating realization. And then I started thinking, well, why should I think he's not talking about me when he's talking about everybody else? I was defending everybody else, thinking, well, I'm his only ally, and then he was doing it to me too. So I found that out 6 months into a 5.5-year period with him, and I kept having to deal with it, and my presidency kept being delayed and delayed and delayed until finally I agreed to become the vice chairman. But then he started, threatening again, and it just got to the point that I was going, he wanted complete control. He absolutely wanted complete control, and I was in his way because I had complete control of the most lucrative division of the company. The television department made 3, 4, and 5 times as much money as every other department in our worldwide organization, and I carried a big stick, not to mention the fact that I'm this nice guy who everybody likes. So he hated me. He just hated me. And I remember going to see my pastor at the Presbyterian Church in Los Angeles, Bel Air Presbyterian Church, and telling her about him, and she said, Sam, what you don't understand is that his problem is that you remind him of what he isn't, and that's just really hard for him to take. And try as I might to have a relationship with him, and I have to tell you something, Bob, it reminded me in a lot of ways of my father. And, I did the best I could, but I got to the point in the last year or two that I had to go to my church to pray for strength to get through each day. And it wasn't until I stopped that prayer and started praying, God, is this what you want me to do with my life, that things opened up. And I realized, you know what, you've done this as long as you need to do it. It's been 27 years. You've had a great ride. You don't deserve to feel this way. There are other things more important in your life. And I went with 2 other partners who were feeling the same way I was. We settled out of our deal, sold all our ownership in the company back, and we got the hell out of Dodge.
Is it hard for a guy who wants wants to like everybody and wants people to like him, to realize, even as late in his career as you did with this guy, not everybody is likable, and you can't like everybody, and it's okay to really not like somebody.
And it's also okay, Bob, to choose yourself. I have never chosen myself before. I'm never on the list. I'll never forget my friend Winona Judd went on Oprah when she was starting a real big weight loss campaign during one of Oprah's diet months. And Oprah asked her, how did you allow yourself to get so out of shape? And she said, because I never put myself on the list. I always was caring about everybody else and not thinking about myself. And while the weight issue is not my issue is I have a disease, and the disease is called I can't say no. And whenever I think someone needs me, I'm there. And for once, I had to put myself first. Now, after I left, dozens of agents and their clients left the company. And I would get phone calls from those who stayed, almost crying, and they would call late at night on their private phones because they didn't want to take any chance that somebody could trace the fact that they were calling Sam, because that would have not been, cool to the new regime that I left in charge. And they would say to me, there's no one here to take care of us anymore. And I would say to my wife, I feel so guilty. I'm not there to take care of them. And she said, love, you took care of them for 27 years. It's time for them to take care of themselves. And I know she's right, but there's that thing in me wanting to help them. And but I really had to do this for myself. And it was the first time I had ever done it in such a big way, but it was the right thing to do. And so many things have opened up in my life since then, and I know that God meant for me to lead there, and he meant for me to help raise $30 million when Hurricane Katrina hit my home state, back in 2005. And, I was able to executive produce a huge special for MSNBC that raised $30 million to help the people there. It allowed me time to help the Miss America pageant, which was about to go bankrupt. And I do that completely with no fees and no expenses, pro bono, to help them. My wife was a former Miss Mississippi, and I knew a lot of the former Miss Americas, and I was able to help them. And now to write this book and touch lives, we're donating all the proceeds of the book to charity, and I feel like it's something my mother would have wanted me to do. And though it would embarrass her humble soul that I've made her the principal character in this book, I know that if God lets her look down, he can see the good that we're doing in helping so many people through the proceeds of this book, and I know that she's well pleased.
I wanted to ask you about the church. You just mentioned it a minute ago. My sense is from reading the book that while you are clearly you are devout to God and your religion, you're still a man who picks and chooses his friends and associates based more on the people that they are rather than being, blindly following an ideology. And I say that, I guess, because several times in the book you reference friends who comprise gay couples, and that's not necessarily something that's big in a lot of churches.
That's correct. But I'm non-judgmental, and I'm non-prejudicial, and my religion and my faith and my feelings are mine, but it doesn't mean I don't respect the feelings and beliefs of others. So I try not to get on a soapbox and preach. I know what's right for me and what's right for my wife and my family, but I don't pick my friends based on whether they're gay or straight or black or white or Jewish or Christian. I pick them because they have a heart and because I love their heart, and that's what it's about for me. people
within the church give you any grief about having gay friends and gay business associates and all that?
No one in my church has judged me for that.
Good.
No.
What is it that the rest of the country could learn about understanding and compassion for homosexuals from Hollywood, do you think?
What else could they learn? I think that they could learn that, they are drawn to someone that they love just like heterosexuals are drawn to someone that they love. And the way we all look at it has to be as human beings. And everybody has rights, everybody has emotions, everybody has baggage, everybody has problems, everybody has successes, everybody has failures. And what I think that people should do is look at people's hearts. That's the most important thing. And leave the rest up to God.
And now, having asked you that, I want to flip that on its ear and ask you, what could Hollywood stand to learn about the way the rest of the country thinks?
Well, I think that Hollywood sets the pace for what the rest of the country thinks. They set the fashion sense. They set the I've got to have this kind of car sense. They set, I've got to have this kind of girlfriend sense or this kind of boyfriend sense. Hollywood and the media has always shaped, the pop icons who America looks up to. And I think in some ways the world of politics does the same thing. Michelle Obama, I think, has set a great example for mothers and for hardworking wives. I think that Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis did the same thing in the 60s. I think that Betty Ford did it in the 70s. We've had a lot of great first ladies. Nancy Reagan was a well-loved and well-respected first lady. But the Hollywood stars, the stars for decades, when Marlon Brando wore his T-shirt in Streetcar Named Desire, the next day there was a run on T-shirts after that movie opened, and every man in America went out to buy one because he wanted to look like Marlon Brando. So what Hollywood needs to do is to put the positive messages about heart and faith and love and character out there more than they do, and in so doing can bring more people to that.
And let me ask you about something that's in the headlines even today. You probably see this one coming, but well, first of all, you're still currently involved with the Miss America pageant?
Yes, I'm the chairman of the board.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I didn't know. I just want to make absolutely sure that was current. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know here, but Miss California USA, Carrie Pageant, in the other tournament, rattled some cages in the Miss USA competition a few weeks ago with her stand on gay marriage. And first of all, let me ask you, how glad are you that took place over at Miss USA and not Miss America?
Well, I'll answer it this way. I feel sorry for her because she had an opinion and she tried to express her opinion and she was grilled for it. In the Miss America system, we encourage our young women to have an opinion. And if a Miss America contestant had that opinion on national television, none of our judges would have ever come out against her for that opinion. None of them would have ever gone on a blog and talked about it to bring all this negative attention. They would have respected her as we asked them to for having an opinion. The only way a Miss America contestant can lose points is if she has no opinion. We want them to have opinions. We want them to be who they are, and they will not be persecuted for saying.
So
the USA program is a different program. We are based on community service, scholarship, talent, beauty, yes, but we would have never done anything like that. And I do feel sorry for her for having to go through that.
And are you glad that it's not happening in your pageant?
But as I said, she could say that in my pageant, but she wouldn't be persecuted for it.
All right. And what about the other issue that she's having? Is that was one issue, and then suddenly all these pictures showed up, or a couple of pictures showed up.
I know, and then the whole question comes: if she hadn't answered the question that way, would the pictures ever have shown up?
Right.
If she had won, would the pictures have shown up? Well, a lot of these girls are models, and they enter the competition having modeled, and if some of them have done backless shots or cover their breasts with their hands as part of a lingerie ad or something, then I guess that's what they choose to do. But, you should be more honest about it, and I think that's the problem. If she hadn't signed a contract saying she had never done anything like that, it wouldn't be as big a deal. But if she had come clean with it at the beginning and said, I did some modeling and you might see a part of my breast in a couple of shots, then maybe it would have been more palatable. But I think the problem is that she didn't divulge that.
One of the most famous examples of this did come, I think, from Miss America, was Vanessa Williams. If that happened, if the Vanessa Williams case had happened, in the last couple of years under your watch at Miss America, would it have had a different result, or would it have come out the same way, do you think?
I think it probably would have come out the same way, and I had great respect for Vanessa. She's a friend, and she knew at the time that once those pictures came forward, she really needed to resign. And it was the right thing to do. And she is beloved, and she's so talented and so wonderful. But I think that it was the kind of pictures, that made that so shocking in 1984.
Mm. And it's 2009. Obviously, it's 25 years. It's amazing. It's 25 years later. Are those things still that touchy within the pageants? And is it mostly within the pageants, or does the public really get that excited about it? I didn't get the sense that outside of Perez Hilton and a couple of people who are looking to inflame things, that anyone really cared that she gave her opinion, or that these pictures are all that big a deal, except within the pageant people.
Well, if we take this Miss California USA situation, I don't think anything she's done warrants the negativity and the abuse that she's taken. She had an opinion, and she was working as a model, and they should just let that go. That wouldn't have caused me a problem. Mm. It's because I think in a lot of ways her opinion was conservative that they jumped on her.
I agree. I mean, I listened to it twice, and I thought, okay, you asked her opinion, she gave it to you, move on.
Right.
I don't.
Move
I guess
on.
It was because of,
move on. You're saying it correctly.
Who asked? Yeah.
They need to move on.
Why? You've gone from now I obviously I've read the book, and I know that you were involved and your wife was involved with Pageant in college, and it was very important to you then. But it's so many years later. You're a grown man. You've spent 26 years at William Morris Agency. Why of all the things that you could be doing, are you the chairman of Miss America Pageant? It just seems to me that there would be more and better uses of your talents and time. No disrespect at all, but
No, and I've had that question many times, because when you sit in the seat of power that I sat in and have the relationships that I have, a lot of people have asked, and I turned down a lot of jobs after I left William Morris, and I fortunately didn't have to take them, and I didn't want to take them, but the Miss America organization had meant so much to me as a college kid, and obviously it was important to my wife. It gave her scholarships, helped her complete her entire education. How could I not say yes when they were about to go bankrupt? How could I not go in and try to save an organization that makes available $45 million a year to young women in the United States to go to college at the local, state, and national level? How could I say no to that? And I admittedly say I have a disease called I can't say no. But when these former Miss Americas called me and said, Sam, we need you, I knew that I understood television. I knew that I understood, raising money in the private sector. I knew what it was to give scholarships. I knew about nonprofit organizations. I had this knowledge and skill set, and my wife used a verse from the Bible, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it's from the book of Esther. You were prepared for such a time as this. And I take no money. I do it completely pro bono and volunteer. I do it because this organization needed help. And again, I say, how could I say no to them when it's provided so much good for so long, for 88 years? There's never been another organization in the pageant world like Miss America. And by the way, all little girls want to grow up to be Miss America. And I just didn't want to have that taken away.
Well, and it's funny you said that, because you're leading down the path I wanted to go. There's a difference, I think anyway, from you're in college and you've met this beautiful woman who becomes your wife, but you help her with the pageant, and she's
right.
very successful at it, and then years later you go into a completely different industry, and you become a father, you have a son, you have a daughter. Didn't your view of these pageants and the way they objectify women change once you had a daughter, as opposed to helping your wife through a pageant? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've got a 12-year-old, and I don't know. I wouldn't have a lot of comfort with it if she decided that was the thing that she wanted to focus the next 4 or 5 years of her life on.
Well, let me just say this to you, and I don't know how much you know about Miss America, but don't look at all those little girl pageants, and don't look at all those USA pageants and Universe and all of that and Miss World. Look at the Miss America program, the single greatest opportunity to give scholarships for young women in the world. No one else gives more money or makes more money available than the Miss America pageant. And when you see these girls going through the program and they're involved in hundreds of hours of community service and working on their talent and working on their platform, and these young women work for Children's Miracle Network and raising money for Children's Hospital. These young women work for the Heart Fund, Juvenile Diabetes, Make-A-Wish. It's amazing to see what it does to prepare them for the world. And I would be completely open and willing if my daughter decided to enter. And what I would like to encourage you to do is not to discourage her, but if she comes to it on her own, encourage her.
Well, I do that with whatever she wants to do. I'm one of those parents who, I may not. My mother said something to me. I mean, she had always said, "Look, I may not agree with your choices. I may not like the things you decide to do, but I will always support you because you're my kid." And she may have put it a little more elegantly, but I feel that way about my own kid. It's like if this is what she wants to do and she comes by, okay, but it's not something I'm going to set out. And I was going to ask you actually if Mary Lane had ever expressed interest in this, knowing that her mother had been a Miss Mississippi.
She's always loved it. She's always wanted to do it, but her sights are on Broadway now. She's at NYU in New York in the prestigious CAP 21 program at the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University, and I think that's where her focus is, but she still loves it, and she watches it with her friends at college. She's come to several of the Miss America pageants I've executive produced, and she loves it. And who knows, maybe she'll surprise me one day and when she's 23 or 24 decide to do it. But she appreciates what it stands for, whether she ever does it or not. And when she was a teenager, she used to say, well, I might do Miss Mississippi or I might do Miss California. And I said, that's great, baby, that's great. But, she's into other things now. And if she comes back to it before she ages out, that's great. If not, she has an appreciation for it, a respect for it, and an understanding of it. And that's all she really needs.
Well, you make my life easy because you mentioned New York, and I was thinking Broadway. And so let me just ask you, Dolly Parton was a longtime client of yours, back in the news with the Broadway opening of 9 to 5 musical.
And she just got a Tony nomination for the musical score.
Can she get Mary Lane apart?
Well, she loves Mary Lane, and she identified Mary Lane's voice as a little girl. Mary Lane had one of the leads in Oliver when she was in the middle school, and Dolly came to see the show. And she turned to me at intermission and she said, there's not another child on that stage can hold a light to her. She's heading straight to Broadway. So if Dolly Parton's producing a show and Mary Lane's out of school and auditioning, she might get a part.
Tell us something about the real Dolly, the one who cooked for you and became your friend. What should we know about her that we don't from
I think you know everything about Dolly that is real because she's always been that way. She doesn't hide anything. She's just the most loving, giving, delightful, entertaining, pure heart of a person that I've ever known. And a really good friend, and she's been so good to me and so good to my wife. In fact, she had this song, I mentioned it in the book, a song called Try that she had performed in a couple of concerts but never recorded. And when my wife got her first record deal with Concord Records, it was an inspirational standards album, and we needed an original cut for the title track. And I had always loved this song, and I went to Dolly, and she said, well, I'm saving that. I don't think I want to give that away now. And then she thought for a minute, oh, hell, she'll probably sing the hell out of it. She can have it. And so she gave Mary her special song. And, she would take Mary Lane, and she would take young Sam, and she would come to birthday parties and come to dinner, and we would go with her to her house. And it's just, we went to Dollywood with her, and she gave us private tours, and then we went to her Tennessee mountain home for the weekend, and she came to Amory, Mississippi to headline one of my Stars Over Mississippi concerts. I had her meet the Prince, I always put my people together. All my friends and clients get to know each other, and they have me in common in the beginning, and then they discover that they really care about each other at the same time. But Dolly is exactly what she appears to be, wonderful, loving, talented, enormously talented, and so smart. Such a good businesswoman.
Let me ask you about the guy who wrote the introduction to your book, Ray Romano.
Yes.
He in the introduction, he says that you are one of his three heroes in life alongside his brothers. So I'm kind of wondering, outside of representing his interests at William Morris, on what other levels do you guys connect?
Well, we connect through charity. He's a very charitable person, and he's been involved in several of my charities. I mean, he was one of the first people to volunteer to come to my hometown to host one of my Stars Over Mississippi benefits. He and Whoopi Goldberg came and did one together. And then when the Katrina, devastation happened on the coast of Mississippi, Ray was one of the first to step up and come with me to Mississippi to help raise money for the victims. And, he and his wife Anna and Mary and I are close friends. We see each other several times, a year for dinner. And, we're involved in special occasions together. And, I still talk to him about his projects. He's got a new series coming out on TNT next fall. And we still talk about his projects and what his dreams are and what mine are. And he's so excited about this book and was so honored that I asked him to do the foreword and has been so incredibly supportive of me.
And since you've left William Morris, did you find, as some people do, that when you're out of that position of power, that people that I'm not saying Ray or Dolly at all, but that some people that you thought were your friends, who you socialized with, who spent a lot of time and energy on you, that they just kind of disappeared from your life?
I had a lunch with the president of a network who had just left the job 6 months before I left William Morris. And he sat down with me and he said, the one thing I want you to know when you change jobs midstream like I did and like you are now is that you're not going to have the same table at Spago. You're not going to have the same, friends. They're all going to go off and they'll start being friends with the person in the chair that you left and so forth and so on. And I'm very, very proud to say that I still have the same table at Spago and I still have the same friends. Everybody has stayed with me. And I'm so, so grateful for that. And I believe it has to do with the way I established my relationships with them. And though I may have had a different experience than my network president friend, I had my experience. And it was the experience that came from living my life.
Well, it's interesting because I make my living writing books with CEOs, and a lot of times they've left the company that they're best known for, and they have that experience that I was describing, where suddenly the people that they spend all their time and energy with they don't return their calls as quickly. They're not interested in going to lunch or dinner with them like they did. So it's good. I guess that's part of the character issue that this whole book is about.
That's correct. And the fact that they recognize that and they still want to be my friend says something to me. Yeah.
Just a couple more quick things, and I'll let you go. You've been great and very patient. And
you've been great, and these are great questions. I appreciate this is the first really in-depth interview I've given. Most of them are about 10 minutes, so this is great.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Tell everyone writes a book. Dude, you wrote one of the longest acknowledgement section I've ever seen in the book, and I wondered if since publication, I'm guessing that you probably realized that you missed a few people nonetheless. Am I wrong?
Yes, I did, and it wasn't intentional, I can tell you. It was the toughest part of the whole process. Writing a book, when you know your format and you know your subject matter, is tedious, but it's not difficult. The acknowledgments are long. I do admit it, and everyone who cares about me told me they were long. I even heard from Random House about it. I heard from my wife about it. And there were those who felt that I should just thank the 10 people or so that helped me in the process of getting the book made, and then to all the hundreds of others who have been a part of my life. But I couldn't do that. And I'm going to tell you why. Because everybody who is mentioned there has played a part in my journey. And I could not tell stories about every one of them in the book. I have stories about every one of them. Every single person in those acknowledgments I have a story about and a way that they touched my life. And if the only way I could tell them that they touched my life was for them to see their name, then that's what I had to do. And I agonized for months over it. For months. And had to really keep it to the people who were a part of my life now. There are a lot of people who are not a part of my life now or who I just haven't seen or heard from who are going to read this and go, well, I thought I was important enough. You mean he put 250 names in there and I'm not one of the top 250? And I haven't heard from anyone specifically, so I hope I hit most of the ones.
Well, that's why the editors generally tell you, 10 or 12 people, and then everyone else who gets left out.
To their credit,
they'll leave out a lot of people. Yeah.
To their credit, they let me do it.
Oh, that's good. They probably you probably see when you start getting royalty statements that they've subtracted an extra $5,000 for printing costs for the introduction. They're very tight these days.
Right. I know. Everyone is.
So let's finish here. To whom, besides your mom, have you made promises about the way you lived your life?
To my wife, Mary, who is another strong influence in my life, obviously, and I even talk about in the book where her opinion trumped my mother's for the first time and how gracious my mother was about that. And then my mother's sister, my Aunt Betty, who is still alive, and she sort of took over as my mother when my mother died. And I'll tell you just one funny little story that she made me promise after my mother had died, and that was dealing with changing my membership from the Baptist church to the Presbyterian church. And I said to my Aunt Betty, you're going to hear in church on Sunday, because I'd never moved my letter. That's what it's called when you change your membership. I'd never moved my letter from the Baptist church the whole time I was in college or the whole time I was in California for the first 5 or 6 years. But once Mary became pregnant with our son, we decided it was time to have a church home. And Mary was raised Presbyterian, and we had gone to Bel Air Presbyterian Church with friends, and we really liked it. And so we decided that's where we'd bring the children up. So I said, you're going to hear in church tomorrow that I'm changing my membership to the Bel Air Presbyterian Church in California. And she was silent on the phone. And she said, now, Sam, I want you to promise me something. I said, what's that, Nanny? We call her Nanny. What's that, Nanny? She said, I know you're about to be a Presbyterian, but in your heart, you'll always be a Baptist. And I promised her that in my heart, I would always be a Baptist. Wow. And so she was able to accept it.
That's great. Well, that is a great way to wind up, I think. And, there's one other thing I want to tell you. I dog-eared so much in this book, and I'm going to, as I was reading it, I'm always looking for stuff to pass on to my daughter. I'm going to give this book to my daughter to read and expect her to read it. I just think, a lot of it, some of the stuff is not really germane to her, but a lot of the stuff about, the incidents that form a person's character throughout life, I think that someone her age can really absorb and grow on. And so I'm going to, just so you know, I'm going to pass it on to my kid.
I'm really touched by that, and I promise you she'll take something from it. I really believe this is a great book for teenagers and young adults because they're in the process now of trying to figure out who they are and how they want to live their lives, and they act very grown up. And I remember when my children turned 12, and puberty sets in, and they become very adult-like, even in their childlike bodies. But they're very smart, and I think that, from my hour with you, you've probably got a very smart daughter, and I think she'll gain from it.
All right. Well, I got to ask you this, and now that I think about it. So if she misses the bigger point of the book, and all she gets out of it is that she either wants to be a Hollywood agent or a Miss America contestant, which way should I steer her, given the choice?
She can do both. She can be Miss Florida, and then she can move to Los Angeles. If she doesn't win Miss America, she can become an agent.
Oh my God, that's not what I thought you'd say, but okay, I'll let it go at that. Folks, listen, you can order, you can find Sam Haskell's new book, Promises I Made My Mother, at great bookstores everywhere, or online, Amazon.com or mrmedia.com, and it's a fine read. If you listen to the hour, you could tell I read the book cover to cover. I can
tell, and I appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. And Sam, thanks so much for joining us on Mr. Media today.
Thank you, Bob. It was great talking to you.
All right, Sam. Hey, you take care.
You
Maybe
too,
we'll see you in St.
Bye-bye.
Pete. All right. Bye-bye.
I'm looking forward.
All right. Oops.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So, folks, for more business-related interviews, you can surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversations with Isidore Sharp, founder of Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, or Guy Kawasaki of Apple Computer and Alltop.com, and many more. Please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites. Whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, Pointer Online, MySpace, Facebook, NetVibes, Multiply, Zanga, Digital Journal, Friendster, Orkut, Bebo, Tagged, iGoogle, Yahoo, Podcast Pickle, Vox, Folio, Mediafly, Podfeed.net, Blueberry, Zencast, or Odeo. Whew. You can also listen with a piece of string in a tin can in many locations. Subscribe to Mr. Media in iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media Interviews within the podcast section of iTunes and click the free subscribe button. It's that easy. If you've got an idea for a guest, email me directly at bob@andelman.com. It's ANDELMAN. You can also follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, www.twitter.com/Andelman. Thanks so much for joining us today. Always appreciate when you give up a little piece of your day to spend it with us.